Purify my mind with your light, that I may know there's no night, only thy loving presence. Give me power of sight to know what's wrong and what's right, that I may soar in flight to that one without a second, that one without a second. Brahman is whole, Brahman is one, all is Brahman, all under the sun. Brahman is whole, Brahman is one, all is Brahman, all under the sun. You give the power to speak, the rhythms moving our feet, the wind that moves our breathing. You are without and within, my precious Lord and my friend, my dearest beloved, my dearest beloved. Brahman is whole, Brahman is one, all is Brahman, all under the sun. Brahman is whole, Brahman is one, all is Brahman, all under the sun. Purify my mind with your light, that I may know there's no night, only thy loving presence. Give me power of sight to know what's wrong and what's right, that I may soar in flight to that one without a second, that one without a second. Brahman is whole, Brahman is one, all is Brahman, all under the sun. Brahman is whole, Brahman is one, all is Brahman, all under the sun.
Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Homaham Jyoti Gamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Avi Ahavir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Pa Inityam. Om. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. My subject this morning is the 5 sheaths. And we're going to be talking about a subject that is of interest to you all, and that is yourself. Vedanta teaches us about the real and the apparent man. And in the Taittiriya Upanishad in the second chapter, it talks about the 5 phenomenological selves that constitute the personal identity of the apparent man. Each one of these selves, or Atmas they're called, is interpreted by commentators as a kosha or a sheath. And you can think maybe of a leather covering for a sharp knife. But there are a number of sheaths or coverings over our true self. Maybe we can visualize them as layers or bodies or selves or skins of an onion. And or maybe we can visualize them as, maybe you've seen those dolls that you might see in a curiosity shop, one doll within the other. They're called Matryoshka dolls. There's a Russian doll. You open one doll, and inside that there's another doll. Inside that there's another one. So like that, we're talking here about 5 sheaths, or 5 selves that constitute our apparent self-identity. Maybe we can think of them as if you think about a lamp. The lamp is light is burning. It's a Victorian lamp. It has a Victorian lampshade, which is first it's paper, and then that's covered over with a fine cloth. And then that's embroidered on top of that, and then there's some more designs on top of that. And so like that, in order to actually see the light, which is covered by the shades, you'd have to penetrate through those different layers. And what we're talking about this morning, just in general, we're talking about our basic problem in life, according to Vedanta philosophy, and that is called superimposition. That means we do not know ourselves. Ourselves are hidden from us. They're buried, as it were, underneath layer after layer after layer of our personal identity. And what we have to do, the project here, the method of realizing our true self, is the method of discrimination. And this is a form of discrimination practice, of which there are many. And the purpose of this discrimination, that is what we mean by discrimination here, we mean sorting out all of the levels of false belief that we have about ourselves. The result will be the removal of this false superimposition and a clear vision of our true nature. So let's look here at the first and most obvious reference for our self-identity, and that is our body. The body is the first, most obvious sheath or covering. And you remember how in the Chandogya Upanishad, the 8th chapter, Indra and Virochana, they heard a proclamation of Prajapati, the Lord of the universe, speaking to the universe, saying that the Atman is infinite, existence absolute, knowledge absolute, bliss absolute. He who knows this Atman becomes the ruler of all the worlds. And so these two came seeking their guru, Prajapati, yes, seeking, teach me about the self. They came as disciples to the guru. And the guru, Prajapati, said, yes, you live with me for 32 years in the ashrama, serving God and meditating. And then I will give you instruction. And after that time, he called them together. And he said, yes, you want to know about the Atman? Go to that lake nearby. They looked out, there's a beautiful lake, calm, the surface is calm, placid like a mirror. And he said, you go and look in that lake, and what you will see will be yourself. The word here is self. Sanskrit word, Atman. And the levels, for it have levels of being. So they both went to the lake. They looked in the lake, and Virochana, he looked there, and what did he see? Oh, he saw his own handsome face. And he saw he was decked out in all these expensive clothes and robes and jewelries. And he thought, oh, thank God. He said, I'm glad. Thank you very much. I understand. Now I know myself. And he returned back to his kingdom. He was the king of the demons. And so that's why we say, well, that's materialistic. Demons are very materialistic. They take the body to be themselves. But Indra, he looked there. He also saw it, oh, yes, turned and started on his way home, but then started to think and contemplate. And he went through the same progression that we're going through this morning of analyzing our nature. We do the same thing when we stand before a mirror. We look at myself. I look in the mirror and I say, oh, that's me. Yeah, we identify, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm standing here. I have good posture. I'm standing in this place. As we fully identify with our physical body. And, well, certainly we can't deny that the body is very present to us. And we ought not to deny the body. We can't ignore the body because we are embodied souls. We can't run away from the body. And therefore, the teaching of Vedanta is that we learn to live in the body with discrimination. Sri Ramakrishna gives the village example of the coconut. That is, in a coconut tree, you get a coconut that becomes more, it falls to the ground. It's just it's not eaten. It becomes as it becomes older and more mature. The inside, the flesh of the coconut contracts, and you take the shell and you can rattle it. You can hear the coconut inside as it rattles in the shell. This is how we should think of ourselves. We're in the body, but we are not the body. The body, after all, just to make it simple, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, same chapter, it outlines the whole of evolution. It comes down to the earth, and then on the earth there grow plants, and from the plants we make food, and from the food comes human beings. That's the origin of human, that's what we begin with food, we're born with food, we're sustained by food, and to food we return in the end, when we're planted in the ground. So this is the nature of the first discrimination. We can be very clear we're not the body. The body is born, grows old, and dies. The body changes. The body is an object. I am the subject. Like this, the discrimination, the Vedantins discriminate and think about the nature of reality. The bottom line is, the spirit is not the flesh. And to think it is as foolish as Shankara says, as a farmer who, looking at his cow standing in the field, and he sees the horns and the tails and the body of the cow, and he thinks, I am the cow. Well, that would be foolish. He's not the cow. He's the farmer. He's separate from the cow. And that's the first discrimination. The first level of our being when we refer to ourselves. Let's go more interior and think a little bit more deeply about myself. And from there we learn from yoga psychology that there's another layer or level which is called the pranamaya kosha. Kosha is the Sanskrit word here for sheath. The original word in the Sanskrit is atma, self. And the idea is that we identify with the vital force, the prana within us. The prana is that energy, that subtle energy, which animates the body and that differentiates a living person from a dead person. It's this prana, this subtle energy, which is responsible for the beating of our heart and for the circulation of our blood and for our digestion, and most importantly, maybe for the in-breath and the out-breath and our breathing. This is all due to the prana. And as long as that prana is circulating within our body, that is the prana is kind of like, we could say it's like electricity. And just like a computer, if it's unplugged, is nothing more than a heap of metal. When you plug it in, suddenly it lights up. It begins to speak to us. Why? That's because electricity flows through the computer. Similarly, it is with the prana. The electricity flows through wires, or more properly, through circuit boards, whereas the prana flows through meridians and through nadis and subtle channels throughout our body and make us alive. That's what makes us feel alive. If those channels are all open and everything is flowing properly, then we feel alive and vigorous and alert and healthy and refreshed. But if one of those nadis are blocked, short-circuited or something, then we begin to feel aches and pains, stress and strain, tension, difficulty. And our minds naturally, ordinarily, we don't think about our bodies. A young, healthy, certainly a young child, they don't think about their bodies. They are just be, that's all. But when we begin to feel aches and pains, then our mind and consciousness is drawn into that psychic, that level of vibration. We become identified with that vibrational level. Identified means we allow ourselves to be put in the same category and to say, oh, that's the way I feel. That characterizes myself. And yet Vedanta teaches us, you're not your energy body. Be aware of when you identify with the movements of the prana in your body, because prana, that is the Atman, is not the prana. Sanskrit, this was analyzed in ancient times in the Sankhya philosophy. Everything in the world was analyzed into two things, matter and energy. Prana and akasha. Primal matter, primal energy. That's everything, except for one thing, and that is consciousness. So you have consciousness, that is our self. And then you have nature, that is matter and energy. And the idea here in our discrimination, we want to convince ourselves not to identify with the matter, that is the body, or the energy that animates the body, that is the prana. Because our true nature lies deeper within ourself. These are all coverings. We've gone from the gross body to the subtle body. Now we're going to analyzing the subtle body. Let's go more interior here than the vital sheath. And that is the mind. The mind, we could define generally as the matrix of thinking, feeling, and willing. And we could visualize it as it does in the Yoga Sutras, as a lake. And we think of a calm, placid, serene lake. And then a gentle breeze comes up. The wind begins to blow more strongly, whips it up into ripples and waves. And each one of those ripples, those waves in the lake of the mind, that's what we call. Those are what we call sensations, percepts, concepts, names, emotions, feelings, memories. These are all vrittis, or waves in the mind stuff. Now, there are two rubrics under which the yoga psychology discusses this subject of the mind. First, let's look at the lower mind. There is the lower mind and the higher mind. Let's look at the lower mind. The lower mind is what we could call, the Sanskrit is called the manas. It is our perceptual mind. The perceptual mind is in charge and supervises the ingress and the egress of all the sensations that come to us from the input, we can say, from the external world, that we through the five senses of perception, and the output through the five organs of action, the hands and feet and the voice, for example. That's controlled by our perceptual self, by the manas. We could call it the attention. The senses cannot function without the mind. If you were reading a book and the cook would ring the dinner bell, later on the cook comes and asks you, "Why didn't you come when I rang the bell?" "Oh, I'm sorry," you say. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the bell. My mind was elsewhere." That is, your attention was elsewhere. You were reading that, you're focused, you were concentrated, and so you did not hear the sensation, the ringing sound of the bell. You didn't sound, sights, or oblivious of the input of the five senses. Requires the mind. That's why the lower mind is called the inner sense. Each one of our senses is staffed, we could say, by an attendant. The attention has different attendants. And each attendant in charge of that line of sensation, the stimuli that come to us from the external world. And all of those are put together by, when they form within our mind, we form percepts. We don't perceive, we don't know sensations directly. All that we know are percepts. That means whole things. That is, the things are presented to us. We look out there, we see a tree. That's a whole tree. That's a percept. So like that, that percept appears in a visual field, which is a holistic field. It's a unified field of perception. That's the manas. That's the lower mind. This is we share in common with animals. Or maybe some higher animals. And so there, the mind is there, the manas, the lower mind is there. And the manas gets all these sensations, percepts, and it looks at what is to do. Well, it weighs pros and cons. Is it this? Should I do this? Should I do this? How should I react? How should I respond? The lower mind, the manas, does not know what to do because it is not the knower. And in the absence of a higher power, it will refer, in humans, it will refer to what we call the ego. The ego is just the immature, the unripe, the pre-logical, pre-reflective mind. It's the mind, if we're considering the mind, that is this part of the mind, the lower mind, is dominated by emotion. It's emotion-driven. We could call it, in transactional analysis, it's called the inner child. We love children, but we know as spiritual aspirants that sometimes a childish mind can be a problem for us. Because the child mind is naturally emotion-driven. It's impulse-driven. And it's driven by likes and dislikes. That's what determines what is to be done. The vasanas, the sum total of all the impressions of our past actions. That means our habits, our tendencies. It's the reactive mind. This is the behavior of the lower mind called the manas. This manas can be sometimes unruly. That is our mind. Our mind is sometimes unruly. It sometimes is rebellious and disobedient. And you know, if a father were to tell his son, help your mother, take out the garbage. And the son says, I'm playing this video game. I'll do it later. Now, what is that? That's called disobedience. That's the way our mind works. Our mind is not obedient to our higher nature. This is the lower mind. We called it the attention. Our attention is scattered. It's fragmented. Our minds are fragmented and impulsive and desire-driven and habit-driven and conditioned. Oftentimes we live large parts of our lives on automatic pilot. This is the lower mind. The lower mind is the automatic pilot. Let's say a pilot gets on, he needs full attention to take off from the airport. He gets up, do the altitude, and then he thinks, all right, I'll just turn on the computer. He pushes a button, then he goes, takes a coffee break. And the whole plane is still flying. What's flying? How? The computer is flying the plane. The computer has been programmed. It's conditioned. It's working by algorithms. It doesn't require any human guidance. This plane is flying, seems to be flying quite well. And this is how maybe often we live our lives, for a large portion of our lives, habit-driven. That is to say, this is called the reflective mind, the pre-reflective mind. You know, in some Vedanta psychology, we could say we don't have to think here in terms of the ego. We can think in terms of just consciousness. There's two kinds of consciousness, reflective and pre-reflective. Pre-reflective consciousness, that is our ego. That means is that we just live, we live as if we go through life like a dream. We don't think about what we're doing. We don't reflect on what we're doing. We're unconscious in the sense we're not conscious. We're not living consciously in the sense that we have no reflective consciousness. We're being drawn by our own following, just our own programming, our own habit. And in psychology, this is sometimes today called the default network. Default network means you try to meditate. There's no way you're going to meditate. Your mind is completely scattered. And your mind wanders. And you're in some faraway place, going on a journey through darkest Africa. You're in safari or something. This is your mind. This is your mind is that's the default, that's the lower mind. That's the default condition of the unreflective mind. We're carried away. Suddenly we realize, what happened? Oh, okay, 10 minutes have passed. Now I think that what we're talking about here sounds familiar. This is the lower mind. This was the third of the levels, or the bodies, or the cells, or the sheaths, which identifying with which conceals our true nature. And we are, for the most part, unconscious in the highest sense. And therefore, we really need to wake up. That's what we hear a lot of Buddhist teachers tell us. We're living lives as if in a dream. He said, why don't you just wake up to reality? Get out of your daydreams. Get loose, cut yourself loose from the concatenation of thoughts. You're caught up in a whole dream of life. Wake up. Become aware of what you're doing. And move to a higher stage of being. This is called the fourth level here of our analysis. This is called the higher mind. So we're doing here three parts. These are three aspects of the subtle body. We have a gross body, we have a causal body, and we have a subtle body. The subtle body has three parts. That is, it has three koshas, it has three sheaths. The third sheath there, which we're working on now, is the mind. And the mind here is the lower mind, which we're very familiar with, and the higher mind. Now, in order to understand that, maybe we can refer to a classic analogy from the Katha Upanishad, which will be helpful to us, and that is the analogy of the chariot. And in the Upanishad it says that this body is like a chariot. And the senses are like the horses. And the roads and the destination, that's like our goals. And the mind is like the reins. And the buddhi, that is the intellect, is like the charioteer. And our true self, that is the Atman with a capital A, is the rider in the chariot. You all know the story there, and how the Bhagavad Gita opens there with Sri Krishna speaking to Arjuna in the chariot on the battlefield. Arjuna here in this analogy represents the buddhi, which is the intellect. Now let's look at the intellect. That's the higher level. This is the higher level, our higher mind. There is a universal cosmic intelligence. And intelligence manifests in man. as reason. That is to say, to be more precise, in the light of intelligence, to give you another additional metaphor, intelligence is like a universal light. The light is reflected in the mirror of the intellect. And that reflection, that of intelligence in the buddhi, that is in the intellect, is called reason. This is what makes us human. Our rational, that is intelligence. Now, first we're going to talk here about its manifestation as reason. Now, what is reason? Well, reason is, now we're working on here the fourth sheath, the fourth level. Reason is just that power that we have within us, which is uniquely human. The power to abstract from particulars, to know essences, to understand what something means, to form words and concepts, to make judgments about whether things are right or wrong, or good or evil, and to form rational arguments according to a logical form, so that we can derive conclusions that give us knowledge. And so the fruit of the intellect is knowledge. We're able to know how to live. And this is the power of the humankind, that we don't have sharp claws, we don't have wings or other powers, can't swim, but we do have the intellect, the power to know and to understand. This is called the determinative. Swami Vivekananda translated the buddhi, the word Sanskrit word is buddhi, translated it as the determinative faculty. The buddhi is the faculty within us, which is called logos. The buddhi is the logos within us. The logos means reason. The logos means rationality. The logos has an ontology, that is, what we know. How do we say that we know reality? That reality embodies the logos. There's a logos within and that without. Therefore, we're able to know reality. This is all the powers of the faculty of the intellect. By the way, what we're talking about this morning is faculty psychology. If you want to read a Western psychology. Faculty, we've spoken about the faculty of attention. There are others. This is the faculty of the intellect. The body is considered, person is considered to be intelligent. I hope we're going to get finished. If we're not finished, then I just stop. Okay? Let's talk here about a person is considered to be a mature adult person when he reaches the age of reason. You know, in Vedanta, there are certain prerequisites for the study of Vedanta. And one prerequisite, it's kind of an unspoken prerequisite, is that Vedanta assumes, that is the study, I'm talking about the study of high philosophy and yoga psychology and all this. It assumes that we are a person of sound mind. That is to say, it's a baseline where we begin. It begins with the assumption that we have reached, as it were, the age of reason, that we have a clear idea of that we have individuated ourselves, that we're mature, that we are, otherwise we will not get able to get the full benefit of this teaching. We have to have a mature sense of ourself, a mature sense of feeling of I consciousness as distinct from the ego. We have to have a sense of reason, of being in control of our lives and not emotion-driven, not habit-driven. It assumes that we are people, that we have some level of integration of our mind and our heart, and that we are independent in ourselves, that we can stand on our own feet, that we use our own hands, that we're self-sufficient, that we can practice self-help, that we can take charge of our lives. All these things are assumed by the Vedanta philosophers before we even begin Vedanta practice. This is all assuming that we are just a person. That's our quality. The only quality that we need, really, is be human. Be a fully mature human person. That's all. And now that will be sufficient. Human means is that we're autonomous. We're inner directed. We're not blown around like leaves in the wind. We make free will choices. This is the autonomous mind, the mind with a moral hierarchy of moral values that control your decisions. This is all assumed before we even begin the practice of any religion or spirituality. So much for reason. Let's look at another part of the intelligence. Let's go back to intelligence. Now, intelligence manifests in the human psyche, that is in the human intellect, as reason. But reason has a higher evolution. It's called intuition. We have a higher faculty within us, and that is intuition. We have a lower mind. We have a higher mind, which I call our rational mind. And then we have an intuitive mind. We're still talking about the mind now. We're still in the subtle body. We have an intuitive faculty within us. That is an ability. And that is the ability to know things without the mediation of the senses or without reasoning, without logical, linear thinking. We have that power, and many of the things which we take for granted in our lives, we know intuitionally, like what's good or what's bad, what's good and evil. We know that that I exist. These are all intuitional knowledge that we have that come to us from our higher faculty. This intuitive faculty of the buddhi, of the intellect. See, this is part of the intellect. All of our spiritual experiences occur in the intellect, but occur here now in the higher, in this higher the evolution, which is called intuition. The intuition that's the threshold of the superconscious. When we begin to do spiritual practice, we begin to cross over into that higher level where we begin to study different levels of supersensuous knowing, of nature mysticism, of deity mysticism, samadhis, and causal states. These are all experiences of the intuitive mind. All of them occur in the buddhi, that means in the intellect, but in the higher trained, this is the trained mind. That is trained in spiritual practices, that is trained in concentration and meditation and self-control and all that you know about yoga. So this is the higher, this is the intuition. I hope we're not getting confused here between, when you start thinking about these things, you may find a little bit of semantic confusion in your mind between the words going deeper and going higher. I mean, when we meditate, are you going deeper? Are you going down? Or are you going down within yourself? Or are you going deeper inside of yourself? Or are you going somehow higher and higher? So these are two metaphors. The way it's pictured here, the way that we can picture it in the yoga books, is that visualize a seated yogi. You see this in the introduction. Swami Vedarupananda was fond of this drawing, probably from the Theosophical Society, of a yogi. Think of a yogi in meditation. And we think of the baseline, that is to say, let's just think of the I. Let's just think first that in the center of his being, there's a series of concentric circles that radiate out. And in the center of that that's the center of his being. That is to say, that's the gravity, the center of gravity of his being. And through that center, there runs a horizontal line. And when you think about it, from that baseline, if you go down and you contact any one of those concentric lines and you follow it fully, it goes up and around and comes down. So what is higher is lower, and what's lower and what is higher. So in any case, let's go on to the fifth covering, the final covering, before we reach our true nature, our self. That's all I care about. I want to be myself. I want to be who I really am. That's all. So let's so let's just sort out all this other stuff. And that is get a more objective, get perspective on all this other aspects of our apparent selves. These are apparent selves. They're not a true self. The last level here is what we would call, now let's move, we're going to move here. We've looked at here the gross body and the subtle body. And then we also have a causal body. When we go to sleep at night, during the day, we become tired. So you lay yourself down at night, your body rests and falls asleep. And all of the organs of sensation shut down. The organs of action shut down. You're not aware of your physical body. Maybe you enter into the dream state. And you begin to have experiences in the dream. Now you're in the mind. The mind is very active, but the mind, just like muscles, there's also material modifications of prakriti, that is of nature. That is, it's just matter, it's just stuff. It also gets tired. The mind gets tired. And so our dreams come to an end and we fall into dreamless sleep, or deep, deep sleep. Now, in deep sleep, we don't know anything. We have no consciousness of our body, of our intelligence, of our minds, of ourself, our ego, of any sensations. And yet we feel a sign of peace, and we feel a feeling of happiness. In fact, it's a deep feeling that we have, which is a very a deep defining line of our own being, which is that as a bliss. This is called the blissful self. The person who is at base, the fundamental self, who is at baseline self, is happiness. And yoga psychology tells us that whenever we experience things, anything in life, we feel moments of happiness or enjoyment, pleasure, or of positive experiences in life. That's just a portion of our true happiness, of our true nature, which is bubbling up from within. The objects are just occasions that evoke the memory of our true, deeper, that is, of our deeper nature, which is a blissful, content, happy, blissful self. It's called the Ananda Maya Kosha. Maya here means consisting of bliss. The self consisting of bliss. But in our discrimination, we have to see that this bliss also is not really the final bliss. Even though it's called Ananda, that is, it's called bliss, it's not really true bliss. It's more like, let's say that it's a very hot day, and you get a jug of cool, ice cool water, and you go over and put your hand on that water pot, and your hand feels cool. Yeah, oh, you're so happy. That's the bliss of deep sleep. But that bliss is not the same as the cold, clear water. That's a bliss, as it were. That's the proximity of happiness that we feel because duality has disappeared. And we are oblivious of the external world, and therefore we tend to feel that happiness. And yet we can see by discrimination that, well, when we awaken in the morning, we could say, yes, I slept happily and I knew nothing. Okay, that shows. What that shows is, okay, there was a level of happiness, that happiness is possible without sense objects, that you can experience happiness without some external thing involved. But it also shows us that this happiness, I slept happily and knew nothing. That means I did not know my true nature. What did I know? I just knew nothing. And yet I know, when I say I know, I was a knower, but I didn't know it. That means you don't have self-knowledge. That is, deep sleep is not samadhi. And we know that very well by the fact that we get up in the morning and it comes to an end. And all that state disappears. It's just a fond memory for us. It sounds like good philosophy, and that's all that's left. And so this state comes and goes, like the others. Therefore, it cannot be real. Now, in Vedanta, you understand, the word real means that it does not change. That's what real is defined as Vedanta. And we have discriminated the 5 different sheaths. There's 5 different sets of contents, and then there's the subject. So you have the body and the body self. You have the energy body and the energy self, the vital self. Then you have the lower mind and the ego self, that is the subject of the lower that. Then you have the subject, you have the rational self, which is the subject of the rational mind. Then you have the wisdom self. That's why it's called Vijnana Maya. It's called wisdom. That's because it assumes that we're in this intuitive progression. The wisdom self. And then we have the bliss self. These we all, as students of Vedanta, we've used our discrimination to separate ourselves. And what are we left with? We're left only with the witness. That is our consciousness. That which is completely disembodied. That which is unencumbered self. Our self which is absolved of all qualifications and of all limitations. That's our true nature. That's the Atman. That's our self, and it appears that it's just an analytical truth. It appears that it's a necessary truth. It seems that it's an a priori truth. That is, that you are the witness self. That you are yourself. And now all we have to do is to realize it. Well, hear about it, think about it, become convinced that it's true, use discrimination and analysis, and meditate upon it, and to realize it for ourselves.
Lead us from illusion to truth and wisdom's sight. Lead us from the darkness that fills up the night. Lead us from death to endless life, to your heart of love, to your eternal light. Reach us through every veil that seems to hide your face, beyond our every ignorance, beyond both time and space. Fill us with courage through thy blessed grace, and fill our hearts with your love by your sweet, compassionate face. Om Tat Sat Om, Om Tat Sat Om, Om Tat Sat Om, Om Tat Sat Om.
Subject next Sunday is Swami Vivekananda in California. And Swami Vedarupananda will speak. Swami Vedarupananda is a senior Swami, the Ramakrishna order. He used to be a professor of atomic physics at MIT, and he gave it all up like straw. He joined the monastery 50 years ago. Now he's 91 years old. So he's going to speak to you next week on this subject, Swami Vivekananda in California. Om Dyo Shanti Antariksha Shanti Prithvi Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Saravam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sa Me Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.